My question is, we in the Pacific are facing the prospect of forced relocation of villages and homes, and even becoming climate change refugees. Now, New Zealand already has a plan for this. My question is to Australia, how is the Australian government planning to help the people of the Pacific in this situation? Thank you.
Penny, we might come back to you in a minute to ask about that New Zealand plan. Alex Hawke.
Well, thanks, Penny. And look, obviously in the future, that would be a matter for future Australian governments to look at. I mean, at the moment, we're focused very much on building and planning ahead of those sorts of events. I mean, as I said, our budget works on climate adaptation, climate resilience. In many places, you can relocate villages to other land masses in some countries. In others, where there are small island chains or atolls like Tuvalu, that may not be possible. There'll have to be a genuinely regional solution put together involving all countries. I'd anticipate Australia would be part of something well into the future of that nature, but we would deal with that as it arose. But for now, the best thing we can do is work with people to stay in their countries, which is what people want to do, and work to help them deal with the worst impacts of climate change. And Australia is at the forefront of doing that when there's a disaster, and you know, we know Pacific countries are the most vulnerable to tornadoes, cyclones, things that happen, and Australia and our
Alex Hawke, I might just go back to our question because he's got his hand up again. And so what is it that New Zealand is doing that you want Australia to do?
Yeah, because that's why I want to ask this question, because New Zealand already have a plan for the Pacific to apply on a climate change visa. We don't know when this is happening. So Australia, we don't know. So that's why I asked this question. And also like what the Honourable I.S. Kayum was saying, Fiji already done relocation. We don't know about Australia.
Yeah, no, thank you. And look, we're different to New Zealand, obviously. We have a different immigration system and a different visa system. We also do a lot more than New Zealand in the Pacific in terms of our budget, in terms of our capacity to do things. We do a lot of work. At any one time, for example, we have about 666,000 New Zealanders in Australia at any one time. So these solutions will have to be planned for regionally, and if New Zealand's thinking ahead and thinking well into the future, well, that's a matter for them. But in Australia, we'll deal with it as we need to, in concert with the countries in the region.
Virasila, I notice you listening very carefully there. Do you want to get in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue of relocation, I mean, I agree with Minister Hawke that the reality is people don't really want to leave their homes because relocation causes another kind of crisis. You're going to go into another land, and in the Pacific, where land is so closely linked to our identity, relocating is not just about going to live somewhere else. It's about uprooting your whole community, your whole sense of self. And I think that that's something that's not easily resolved just by moving to a different country or moving to another geographical spot. So when we're talking about relocation, I agree that there needs to be more investment in terms of adaptation and resilience in those countries, because a lot more people don't want to leave their homes. I mean, that is their home, that's their sense of who they are. Okay. And the other issue is this issue around when you move to another country, you're going to create another lot of crisis there and another conflict, which then becomes another country's problem. So then how do we resolve that?
Okay, I'm going to give the final word here to NLA because he wants to get in on this one.
Thank you, Tony. If I may, relocation is not an option to stop climate change. Wherever you may be relocated, it will not stop climate change. We will be able to stop climate change if we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere as soon as possible. So relocation is not an adaptation issue. Adaptation, you can do a lot of adaptation, and I negotiated in the Paris Agreement. The provision there is loss and damage, Article 8. If Tuvalu didn't have any more islands to adapt to, where are you going to place relocation and adaptation? What would be the meaning of those? That's where relocation issue and compensation has to be considered. And in order for that to work, no single country can do it on its own. We have to have a United Nations Convention on the rights to protect the rights of people displaced and relocated by impacts of climate change. That we need to take it to the United Nations as soon as possible in order to protect the rights of these people, because they are not refugees. I will hate to call the Tuvaluans refugees because of the actions of others. Refugees are people displaced by political pressures at home.
Okay.